Welcome to an Arkansas AgCast Deep Dive, where we take a closer look at news that impacts you. The Arkansas AgCast is brought to you by the Arkansas Farm Bureau Federation.
All right, welcome to the latest episode of the AgCast Deep Dive series. You know, we developed this series as a way to break away from the ag news headlines and take a closer look at a topic that matters to our members. Today, we're going to talk about a few different topics. As always, this show is brought to you by the Arkansas Farm Bureau. I'm the host of today's episode, Jason Brown, and I'm glad to welcome Congressman Bruce Westerman as a first-time guest of this show. Congressman, welcome.
Jason, great to be with you. I didn't know you had such high-end production studios here at Farm Bureau. I always thought of you as the advocacy group for agriculture across the state, and then I come here and get to be a part of this high-tech broadcast.
We bring you to the basement, and it's you know what, they treat us better than we deserve on this show. I'll tell you, we got a lot of good equipment. I'm glad the temperature is reasonable here. Our regular listeners know that we always talk about how cold it is in this room, and it actually seems to be decent today.
Feels great in here today.
We kept it a moderate temperature for you today. Well, thanks for joining us once again. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've been busy. As a matter of fact, you're home for a short break. What have you been up to since you've been back in Arkansas?
Well, like most times when we're back in the state, it's a busy time. This morning, got a chance to go up to Russellville and celebrate the grand opening of the Americold facility, which they freeze a lot of food coming out of the ConAgra plant there in Russellville. So a lot of agriculture ties to that. The governor and I were there. And seems like more and more when I'm back in the state, I'm somewhere with the governor celebrating some kind of economic activity. So I know that's good for the state when those things happen. Then got a chance to go over to the Capitol today and have a little meeting with the Joint Committee on Energy, talking about energy policy, which is something I work on in D.C., and enjoyed a chance to visit with them on that.
Yeah. I got a chance to sit in on that, and you guys covered a wide range of topics, from liquid natural gas to the lithium boom in Southwest Arkansas.
The full gamut of energy in it, a lot of it here in Arkansas. You know, in between that, I got a chance to stop at Arkansas Tech University and visit their engineering program. And
nice.
They got a really good program going on up there. Some nice labs. They've got a robotics team that's like competing for a world championship, national champion robotics team, something Arkansas can be very proud of. And I was talking to those young men up there about how much time do you spend here in the robotics lab versus your schoolwork and other things. They said it's not even close. We spend all of our time here.
Really?
So, they're really bought into it and energized about the competition and representing Arkansas Tech and really the state.
Certainly some skills that probably could come in handy in the energy industry along the way as well.
In all forms of the economy, those skills are very much needed.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. Well, let's get down to business. I know you've got a lot on your plate. So we'll start by asking you to put your chairman hat on today. We're very proud to have you representing Arkansas as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. Tell us, what are some of your priorities for the committee this year, and why it's important to have an Arkansan in that role?
Well, first off, Jason, that was kind of a dream come true for me to get the chair of that committee. My background is engineering for undergraduate and forestry for graduate school. I'm the only forester in Congress, and the Natural Resources Committee obviously deals with a lot of forestry issues, but it's also got a wide scope of jurisdiction. All of our public lands, from Forest Service to BLM to national parks, our Fish and Wildlife Service, all of the energy and mineral production onshore and offshore, wildlife, all falls under the jurisdiction of our committee. So you got mining and energy and wildlife, all the it's called Indian and Insular Affairs. So all the tribal issues fall under our committee, along with the 5 territories of Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, Northern Marianas, and American Samoa. All of that falls under the jurisdiction of our committee, as well as water and wildlife and fisheries. So things that I really enjoy working on and it gives me an opportunity to not only advocate for things that I'm personally interested in, but things that are very important to the state of Arkansas. So it's a real honor for me to get to chair that committee and to come from the natural state,
Right.
And a state that when I was in fifth grade and had Arkansas history, they said Arkansas is one of the only states, if not the only state in the country, you could put a wall around it, and we provide everything that we need here in the natural state. So we punch way above our weight on natural resources, and I think that upbringing I had here in the state, along with my education and professional interest, has given me a unique opportunity to serve on that committee.
Yeah. So I've always heard that too, and I bet several other people who are listening right now have. Is that a true? Are you verifying that statement? Is that pretty much?
Well, if you look at the necessities of food, clothing, and shelter, we definitely can provide that. We can also provide the energy and many of the things that are mined. The U.S. Geological Survey falls under the jurisdiction of my committee, and they came in and briefed me about this technology they've got called Earth MRI, where they can see 30 kilometers into the crust of the Earth.
Oh, wow.
And the takeaway message from that was, if you have mineral rights in Arkansas, don't ever sell them. Because, they said we basically have every mineral and element known to man below the surface in Arkansas. Now, getting to it at 30 meters or 30 kilometers deep is a different story. But with technology, someday we might be able to mine that. But we are very, very blessed with natural resources here in the natural state.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's pretty cool. Speaking of the work that you do in D.C., you recently rolled out the America's Wildlife Habitat Conservation Act. I think the goal there was to empower states and local communities to manage habitat. You'll correct me if I've got that wrong. But in a separate article, I was reading through this, and I found a separate article that you authored where you evoked a Greek proverb that says, and I love this, so I'm gonna slow it down a little bit. A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. Now, just think about that for a second. I think that wraps up conservation in a nutshell. Tell us how this legislation would accomplish the vision of that proverb and why that's important.
Yeah, I think that proverb does describe the conservation ethic, and conservation is simply being a good steward. I'll get a little philosophical on you here, but
Nice.
Since we're talking about Greek proverbs, but it's been said that a conservative is someone who believes in unchosen obligations. So as a conservative Republican member of Congress, I believe I have unchosen obligations to the things that made America what it is. The ideas and the views of our founding fathers that gave us this position that we have today. So I'm conservative, and I want to hold to those things. And the word conservation just stems from that word conservative. And a conservationist is someone who believes that we have an unchosen obligation to use the things that we have as good stewards today, but we also have an unchosen obligation to leave everything in better shape for tomorrow. And it takes that long-term outlook, like that proverb says, is when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. We have to have an eye for the future. And that's really what conservation is about. So the American Wildlife Habitat Conservation Act looks at how we can create better wildlife habitat with the natural land that we've been blessed with. And I'm really excited about this legislation, especially here in Arkansas. Every state that receives federal Pittman-Robertson funds, which are taxes that are collected on firearms and gasoline for your boat, all those outdoor activities that collect Pittman-Robertson funds, if you participate in that program, you have to have a state wildlife action plan, which the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has a state wildlife action plan. So the purpose of my bill is to move power down to the states and send money to the states so that they can implement the wildlife action plan. Now, this is good not only for wildlife species like turkeys that I like to hunt, but it's also good for endangered species, for songbirds, not just wildlife, but also for plants. So if we want to help wildlife, the one thing we can do to help wildlife is to have better habitat. And the whole focus of this legislation is to produce better habitat, which it's like the Field of Dreams movie. If you build it, they will come. And anybody who's ever been around any kind of habitat management knows that if you do the right habitat management, the wildlife will come. If you create the structure in a fishery and the right water conditions, fish will grow and multiply there. If you use controlled burns and thinning, you know that wildlife will thrive in that. And we've proven that on a lot of private land and even on public land in Arkansas. But the caveat in the Wildlife Habitat Conservation Act is it allows states to go out and do management on federal lands. So the Game and Fish will be able to go do management on the Ouachita and Ozark St. Francis National Forest. They'll be able to do management on the fish and wildlife refuges. And the state agencies have the resources and capability to do this management, plus they understand what kind of management needs to happen to best benefit wildlife. You know, if you think about it, the state wildlife agencies manage the game in the state. Doesn't matter if it's on private land, state land, or federal land. There's one agency that manages that wildlife, and that's the Game and Fish Agency. So we should let Game and Fish and the Forestry Commission go out and do habitat management as well. And from an example I saw over in western Arkansas in my district, the Forest Service went in, and to create better habitat for the red-cockaded woodpecker, they started thinning the forest and doing controlled burns to take this forest back to a pre-European component. Like
Interesting.
The early travelers said they could ride a horse at full gait through the Ouachita Mountains.
Wow.
So that means you had larger, fewer trees spaced out on the landscape, and you had like a savanna grass growing in between. Well, they did this project, and lo and behold, they thinned it and burned it, and all this native vegetation came up from a seed bank that had been in the soil for probably over 100 years.
Yeah.
Well, they saw increased plant biodiversity and increased numbers in wildlife. They got native coveys of quail back there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Increased turkeys, increased deer. And all they did was do management on the land. A unique thing, though, is when they harvested the timber that needed to be thinned, they were able to put that money back in the fund to do more management. And that's what this law would allow to happen, is if management's done on federal lands and they thin timber, they take the proceeds of that timber thinning and put it back into the fund. And the program also allows the Game and Fish to do management on private property and help the landowner to liquidate some of those assets and timber that needs to be thinned to pay for the management work. So
nice.
This has potential to benefit public and private property, which you need to use those two in conjunction if you want to do real wildlife habitat management.
Right. We talk about that a lot, about, you know, the largest percentage of land in Arkansas, I mean, is private. By far, by in the 90%.
So you think
range,
about somebody that's got 20 acres or 200 acres, and they bought that land mainly for hunting, or for recreation, and now if this law goes into effect, they'll be able to call the Game and Fish. They can send out a forester and a biologist. They can look at the land and say, if you want great wildlife habitat, here's what you need to do. When we do this work, we're going to be able to harvest how many ever $1,000 worth of timber off of it, and here's what it's going to cost to do the work. You may get a little bit left over you get to keep, or it may cost you a little bit more to do the management. But once you do this, it's repetitive. You can come back every 5 or 10 years, and the land will produce that revenue again. So it's a sustainable wildlife management program that has a lot of benefits for public and private landowners. And we've got enough public land in this state. I mean, Arkansas has some great hunting and fishing opportunities as it is, but we could blow everybody else out of the water if we would just utilize the resources that we have and take care of them.
Yeah, sure. And we've seen example after example, whether it be livestock or row crop farmers, that when they start to introduce some of these conservation practices, they talk about that's one thing that I've heard a lot over my career, is the wildlife that begins to show up, or even pollinators and birds and, you know, things like that. And it's just, that's really interesting to me. So I appreciate you sharing with us a little bit more about that bill. I want to switch gears a little bit, turn the attention towards energy. So last week, as of when we're recording this, members of the Congressional Western Caucus celebrated Energy Week and passed 2 bills under the House Natural Resource Committee's jurisdiction. These bills were focused on increasing American energy production, something you talk a lot about. Can you tell us a little bit about those 2 bills and why you considered those a win?
Yeah, if you look at the energy revolution that's happened in the U.S., and a lot of people don't realize this, in the past 40 plus years, the economy in the U.S. has grown about 800%. The population has grown, I believe, 47%. We've had 113% increase in vehicle miles traveled. The energy consumption has gone up 20 to 30%. Yet the emissions in the U.S. have gone down 60%.
Wow.
And that's because of the revolution and the innovation of fracking, which has allowed us to capture natural gas in quantities that we didn't realize we had. We've used a tremendous amount of natural gas to have reliable and affordable energy generation. And just because gas burns so much more efficiently, we've been able to decrease our carbon emissions. So that's a great story.
Sure.
There's people who hate fossil fuels who want to ban fracking. So one of those bills that we passed last week that came through the Natural Resources Committee was to, in essence, ban a ban on fracking, to say you can't ban this technology that's created the innovation that's put America ahead of the world on reducing carbon emissions. You know, the U.S. reduced carbon emissions more than the top 10 countries who signed the Paris Accord or the Paris Climate Accord, and all of them together. The U.S. has reduced greenhouse gas emissions more than all of them.
Wow!
And it's some of my friends on the left don't like to admit it, but it's because of the innovation of fracking.
Yeah, sure. So those are big steps in the energy sort of strategy that you've sort of set forth. Okay. Well, let me see. I'm thinking about. I think that sort of wraps up questions on that energy front and the conservation front. But I can't let you get out of here without asking about the Farm Bill. Yeah. You're at Farm Bureau. You know it's coming. So let's just say you mentioned it before, and we all know it too. You're the only forester in Congress. So with that in mind, where do you see the Farm Bill progress as of now? And do you see, not to put you on the hot seat, do you see Congress passing a new Farm Bill by the end of the year?
So on the progress side, I would say the Farm Bill is making great progress because the work in the committee continues to go on. And as you know, Senator Bozeman is the ranking member on Senate Agriculture.
Sure.
So he's traveled across the country. I've attended events with him here in Arkansas. He's laser focused on getting a Farm Bill done.
Yeah.
Rick Crawford is a senior member of the House Ag Committee. He's been laser focused on it. Agriculture is the number one industry in Arkansas, so our whole delegation is focused on what's happening on the Farm Bill. So there's some good provisions in the Farm Bill. I've got a great working relationship with G.T. Thompson, who's chairman of House Ag, and plus working with Senator Bozeman. I think Arkansas's concerns are going to be met very well in the Farm Bill. And I'm probably more bullish on others on us getting a Farm Bill done sooner than later.
Nice.
Back during the whole big kickoff to the 118th Congress, when we were trying to elect the speaker and there was a big debate about the House rules, there was a rule that my staff and I found that was part of the rules, but it had been kind of neutered where it really wasn't a rule. And we worked with some of those who were wanting to change rules to say, hey, this might be a rule that could benefit everyone. And it's called Calendar Wednesday. So Calendar Wednesday means if you pass a bill out of committee and it's on the House calendar, that on Wednesday morning, the chairman of that committee can go to the floor and call up that bill for an immediate vote. So I've been talking to GT quite a bit, saying, the Farm Bill could fall under Calendar Wednesday. You can't do an appropriation bill with it.
Right.
But what it allows is a vote on a bill up or down with only a 51% or a 50+1
Oh, really?
majority in the House, where a lot of the stuff we've been having to pass is on suspension. Well, farm bills are typically bipartisan when they come out of the committee. So if you could get that bill on the floor, it would pass pretty easy with a simple majority vote. So that's still an option that's out there. You still have to get it through the Senate and signed by the president. But I think the farm bill's worth pushing really hard for because it's so critical to so many things that we do here in Arkansas.
Yeah, I know. We certainly, we visited a few weeks ago. I say we, our county leadership and our state leadership visited D.C., had several conversations up there, and that was one of the things that we wanted to drive home every time was we'd like to have a farm bill this year. We want to have the right farm bill,
right?
But we'd like to see it this year too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, look, as we kind of start to wrap up here, we like to end our deep dives with a fun question. And look, I told you this is the one question that we won't give you in advance, and so you'll hold me true. You'll say I didn't give it to you. So here it is. I'm sorry, we're not going to make an exception for you on your first visit. So you attended the University of Arkansas. Fact check me. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right.
They even gave me a degree while I was there.
And unfortunately, they did not make it into the basketball tournament this year.
That unfortunately is correct, too, but we're having a great baseball season.
Yeah, how about
that?
Baseball
season, yeah.
All right. One of your alma maters did make it into the basketball tournament.
And I picked them to win in the first round, too.
Okay. All right. See, you already know where I'm headed. So this is a two-parter. Did you have Yale winning the first game?
I had Yale winning the first game and the second game. I had them losing against Connecticut in the third game. And I hated to see them go down in the second game. It was a nice story.
Yeah. Tell me, I read something. I'm sorry, I'm going to diverge from my last question, from the last part of this question. I read somewhere that Yale wasn't able to send their band to the tournament. And so another school bought Yale shirts, learned the fight song, and went in and played for their game. Have you heard that story?
I have not heard that story.
I have no clue if that story's true, but
I can't imagine Yale not being able to afford to send their band somewhere.
Fair point.
Maybe there weren't first-class seats available or something.
We'll call that plausible then. All right. So really, truly, who do you have? So you talked about you had Yale going out in the third round, but they went out in the second. Who do you have winning the whole thing this year?
So I haven't always been very big on doing brackets, but my family got this group, and they were like harassing me. And without the Razorbacks in it, honestly, I don't care who wins this year.
Yeah.
But with like hours left to submit your bracket, I went in, and I would say in less than 5 minutes, Jason, I filled out my bracket.
Me too.
So I picked Gonzaga this year.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about that is I'm blowing everybody in my family.
That's awesome.
Away. And my when my name comes up, it's got a little flames beside it. And I keep on the family group chat, I said, y'all have flames by your name on your bracket? And it just goes to show you. And I picked the team that beat Kentucky to beat them.
Really?
So I went for a lot of upsets in the early rounds that I got right. There was like one region I picked every single team.
Oh my gosh!
Right? But, I know it gives and it taketh away.
Oh, for sure.
But I was, they tell you what you rank nationally, and I was in like the top 800,000 at one point.
Really?
But
I'm in the top 23 million.
Yeah.
So,
but it just goes to show the least amount of time you put into it, and the least you know about the teams that are playing, probably
that's
you're
awesome.
Just as good.
That's pretty fun. Well, I hope you continue to do well. Skunk all of them for us,
Yeah.
Just whoop them. All right. Well, look, I guess before we get out of here, is there anything else that you wanted to that is top of mind for you that you wanted to share with Arkansas farmers and ranchers and foresters?
I just greatly appreciate the state where I grew up and the people I get to represent.
Sure.
And agriculture is still number one in Arkansas, and I don't see that changing. It's not just important for here, but it's important for the rest of the world. And going back to something we talked about earlier, is there's certain necessities of life we produce those here in Arkansas. We produce them in the 4th District. So I'm very bullish on our future and greatly appreciate what Farm Bureau does to advocate on behalf of farmers and ranchers all across the state.
Well, that's
and tree growers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Congressman, look, thanks for making the time to join us on the show today. It's been a real pleasure having you on the AgCast. I mean that. Please feel free to come back and join us anytime.
Thank you, Jason. Good to be with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, look, that wraps up this special edition of the Arkansas AgCast. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this deep dive episode. We'll continue bringing on guests to take a closer look at topics important to our members. Remember, you can catch new weekly episodes of the Arkansas AgCast every Thursday. Find video episodes on Facebook and YouTube. Listen to the audio version where you listen to podcasts. And make sure to subscribe and leave us a review when you have a few extra minutes. The Arkansas AgCast is brought to you by the Arkansas Farm Bureau. I'm Jason Brown, and we'll see you next time.